I think that one of the biggest problems for people in jail or prison is to recognize how crucial it is, the decisions that you're making right now and how they translate into success. And I don't mean success by getting a job that pays you minimum wage and leaves you with little opportunities to grow. I'm talking about success as far as building a career that will allow you to live with your dignity intact, become a homeowner, live the dream that you want to achieve. That all becomes more possible because the decisions that you're making right now. And in the previous 2 episodes of this particular lesson, we have been listening and learning from James Patterson, an individual who made decisions that are far better than the decisions that I made while he was growing up, and positioned himself to create companies. And I just asked him before this interview began, how many jobs have you created? And it's measured in the thousands. He's built companies, he's sold companies, he's invested in companies. I know I would have learned a lot from him when I was in prison. I'm still learning from him now. I never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do. And I hope that you are taking notes and listening and learning right now. So James, you told me that before, one of the things that you did with Yammer is you guys sold to Microsoft and you were in Microsoft for a year. What was the next phase of your career?
So after that, I wanted to start my own company. So, my experience at Yammer was really great, seeing how to kind of build a company from the ground up, grow it, and I had the entrepreneurial itch to start something myself. When you decided to start something yourself, did you go out and get capital from other investors, or did you fund this all by yourself? So I went out and raised capital. I was fortunate because Yammer had a good outcome that VCs were willing to fund my next venture. So I was able to raise some initial seed capital to start up the company.
And when you did that, just to give our audience a little bit of an idea, because it's really the principles that are similar. I don't care if you're going to start a hot dog stand or if you're going to start a landscaping company, you still have to make use of these same skills of building a record that has a good outcome some kind of way. You've got to have the skill set to articulate a plan. You got to define success, as we've spoken about in our business or in our other lessons. You've got to document the strategy that says, oh, here's where I am. This is the problem I'm going to solve. Here's how I'm going to do it. These are the tools, tactics, and resources I'm going to create. Here's the priorities I have to hit, and then you have to execute. That's one of the lessons that we teach for people. We help them understand jobs are going to be scarce. Figure out how to create your own. You did that when you decided to go out and raise capital from investors. I guess you had to sell them on the vision first. Tell us a little bit about how you did it.
Yeah. I think going back to what you said, I think a skill that I've found is so invaluable, whether it's raising money, whether it's sales, whether it's managing people, is storytelling. So for me, raising money, and I've talked to a lot of investors, ended up raising a lot of capital, hundreds of millions of dollars in capital. And, the thing that I found is the most successful is being able to tell a good story. That story obviously has to be rooted in facts and reality. But in particular, when you're starting a business, you want to make sure you're able to paint a vision, right? So, and a lot of starting businesses is, something along the lines of, you see a problem in the world that you want to solve, or you see, a future state of the world that you want to build. Describe what that world looks like, right? Tell an investor or your early employees. It's the same thing when you're trying to convince people to leave, their secure job at a big company to come work with you at a small company. You have to convince them that, this is kind of worth taking that risk on, whether it's with their money or with their time. And so I think being able to really tell a good story and articulate that vision of the future and get people excited about it, get your investor bought into, this is a problem in the world that I think needs to be solved. That's one, is, articulate that problem. And number two is, why are you the best person to solve it? And just talk about, whether it's your background, interest, skill set, I do think ultimately every person is uniquely suited to solve one particular problem. And, if you can identify that problem, and mostly it's what are you passionate about? What really bugs you about the world, right? What little thing just bothers you that, something that doesn't exist? And, think about like, well, why can't I be the person to build that thing, right? For me, it was technology. It was, the company I started was around mobile messaging. So at the time, Yammer was only on the web. It didn't really have a mobile device. And so, Yammer launched really before the iPhone came out. And during its time, the iPhone came out and it was very clear the world was moving to mobile phones. So my next company was a similar idea, but really focused on mobile devices and particularly focused on workers that didn't have computers. So there, we knew that there were all kinds of workers out in the world, people who what are called field service technicians, where they work on equipment. So similar stuff that I did in the Air Force. They don't sit at a desk, they don't have laptops, but they had mobile devices, and they didn't really have good software at the time. So the company I started was really aimed at giving those people access to good kind of internal communication software.
So you're developing this story, and you use what tools to develop this story? I mean, really, it's your language, right? I mean, you have to put it in words into sentences, sentences into paragraphs, paragraphs into pages. And I got to imagine you just spent some time writing this out in longhand first or at your computer so that you could communicate your vision to somebody else that might write a check for your vision. Yeah.
You communicate in a couple different ways. So in what we did is you create in raising money, you create what's called a deck. So usually it's a PowerPoint or Keynote. So it's slides that are the background. So, you don't want to put everything in the deck. So the deck is kind of the background, right? So that's the backdrop as you're talking, and, you're telling a story that's in sync. Sometimes you want to use data. So if there's a piece of data out there, so for example, one of the pieces of data we used to raise money was just showing how many field service technicians there were, right? So how big the market was. So when you're raising money, one of the things an investor wants to see is, well, how big is this opportunity, right? If I'm going to put my money in, how big can this company get, even if you got 100% of the market? Because sometimes, even if you're super successful, it's just too small for someone to invest in. So you need to, use things like data to be able to show them, hey, if we could achieve, 10% market share, then it's this many customers that translates into this much revenue, just to give them a sense of ultimately how the business can develop, if you're successful.
And what kind of structuring did you create? Did you do that on your own with regard to, starting off with one whole and then dividing up shares? What was your methodology, or what could you tell us about structuring the business on how much am I going to be able to own if I invest money?
So I started the company with a co-founder. So we ended up doing a 60-40 split right out of the gate.
So you and the co-founder have 60-40 split.
60-40 split to start the company.
And then you're going to split that up further. So you're going to dilute that equity shares. How do you guys determine what the company's worth when there's no revenues, no customers, nothing?
Yeah. So the next thing you do is we knew we wanted to hire employees. So we created an employee option pool. So then we set aside 20% for future employees that we were going to hire. So essentially my co-founder and I, we dilute ourselves down a little bit. And then you want to...
In proportion to your equity stake. So you have 60, okay.
So, so now it's, it'd be like 50, 38,
right,
20. And then in terms of an investor, we set aside another 20% of the company for the investors. So in terms of the price, mostly that's a negotiation process, with your investor. There's for early stage companies, there's generally kind of, price ranges that they have, what a company would be valued at, just again, based on things like how big your potential market could be. But a lot of it is very early stage. It's, I think a lot of investors are investing in people. So, the company idea is one thing, but ultimately the investors are going to be valuing, who you are as the founders. So that's going to be a big part of it as well.
So here's what I'm learning from him. They're going to invest in people, and the people are what's your background? What's your infrastructure? Why are you the person to deliver the marketplace? They're going to be assessing how big is the total available market. Is it big enough for me to stroke a check and invest? Because I'm only going to have a little sliver of the pie, but I'm going to be funding it. You should be thinking about these stories right now. It's exactly what I thought about when I came out of prison. I said, this is a big problem. There are millions of people in prison. They have a hard time getting employment. And I'm always trying to bring more value into those jail cells with one mission in mind: help you understand how do I reject the criminal lifestyle and the messaging that prisons are regularly disseminating. And, we could just look at the facts. The longer we expose somebody to corrections, the less likely people are to function in society as law-abiding Americans. And that's why I'm really so grateful to you, James, because you have taken the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with us about people who are in prison. I told you what I do, and maybe you could give some wisdom or why it even interests you. Why you agreed to come down here on your own time, just volunteer your time and help support this program of communicating a message to people in jail and prison.
Yeah. I think right now what I'm really focused on, what I'm passionate about is, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And, so we had talked about, raising money, and that at this point, it was around 9 years ago. And back then, in order to start up a company in the technology space, you needed to raise money because, equipment was expensive. It was much more complicated. Like, for example, hosting, you didn't have tools that are available like, YouTube and all these things where you can just host stuff basically for free. You had to pay for that. And, over the last 10 years, the barrier to entry to starting a business has come down dramatically to the point where someone can start up a business and they don't need to raise any money. You can actually start it yourself. Just
like I do.
Exactly, right? Just create something of value, create content, and put it out there. And you can actually start generating revenue from that and then investing that into more infrastructure and then, and eventually grow a business that way. And I think in particular when it comes to, people who are coming out of prison. So, as we talked about, there's definitely a stigma around, having a felony conviction. And, when you're asking someone else for a job, that stigma is something you have to overcome. And however, if you are an entrepreneur and you're going into business for yourself, ultimately, that's a way to overcome it is, hey, you don't even have to ask anyone's permission, right? You don't need to necessarily get a job working for someone else. If you could produce something of value yourself and disseminate it to other people, eventually you can build a business around that. And I think everyone can produce something of value, even to a small niche. So, you mentioned yourself, it's, there's hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who are in prisons, who are formerly incarcerated. So that right there is a market of people. And in the grand scheme of things, that's a niche market, right? But you're able to, because of your background, your experience, your passion, be able to create a product and address that market. So I think, and a lot of it just goes down to what is your passion, right? Whether it's cooking, whether it's, just sort of different, whatever it is, right? I mean, it's literally anything. There's another group of people out there that have those same interests as you. So, create content to speak to those people, whether it's, videos, whether it's, actually just creating something and disseminating on platforms like eBay or Etsy. There's all these different platforms out there on the internet that basically connect people to people. So this is just a great opportunity, I think. It's something I'm passionate about, just helping entrepreneurs, start businesses, because that's the sort of magic of the internet that attracted me to it in the first place when I was a kid, was just the ability to connect people, right? It started with those chat rooms, and now it's just these full-fledged platforms to be able to, connect with other people and even run a business on there.
And that's one of the lessons that we always share at Prison Press, is that we never ask anybody to do anything that we are not doing. I'm sitting here today in my home talking to the CEO of a company, talking to the CEO that's hired thousands of people. And what is my mission? I'm a guy just like you. I was locked in prison for 9,500 days, 26 years. But every day I used to visualize this possibility of connecting with people like you, James. And now we've got our own little ecosystem. We start as a startup. First, we try to teach people in prison how important it is to develop their skills, develop their communication skills, their critical thinking skills, their vocabulary, their math skills. If you've done that, we create jobs for people. And you know the cool thing that we create jobs for, James, is we help non-criminogenic people understand how easily decisions on the job can lead to a government investigation or potentially a charge. And that is a service. That service we sell to the private sector, and we generate revenues from that. So our startup is part social mission, helping people in prison, helping formerly incarcerated people get into the job market. Then we tap into universities and get interns that help us edit for professional writing, so we lift our writing level up higher. And then we go to people like you and say, hey, here's the value proposition we're offering. And it may not be a huge business market, but it certainly helps me achieve my passion, and that's helping guys in prison, helping formerly incarcerated people build a bridge to get into the job market, and helping more people avoid coming into the system. So I just really want to personally thank you for volunteering to be a part of our program. And I'd like to ask, you'd like to give you the last word for this lesson. If you have any message, we're going to communicate with hundreds of thousands of people in prison, and maybe you can give them a little bit of wisdom that you've gained over, the course of a career and creating thousands of jobs.
Yeah. I think it's when you're starting, it's starting a business. I think the great thing about entrepreneurism is you don't have to ask for permission. You can get out there, find something that you're passionate about, you're interested in, and I guarantee you there's other people out there that share those passions and share those interests. And when you really think about it, that's a market to be able to create a service, and just start servicing those like-minded people, and build that community around whatever it is you're doing. And, from there, it becomes a stepping stone to do, to really just kind of take it in any direction you want.
And if you've listened to all 3 of our episodes with James Patterson, you know that he started building his infrastructure when he was 10 years old, taking a paper route job. He continued learning by developing a really strong work ethic. He continued learning by pursuing his passion in computers and learning as much as he could possibly learn, so much so that in the 5th grade, we were running the computer lab in school, then getting into college, and then into the ROTC, and building communication systems that scale for thousands of people, taking all of that, leveraging that knowledge of leadership, using that in developing his career with businesses, and then selling to big businesses like Microsoft, raising capital, employing people. This is what you can be doing right now. Maybe you're like me and you didn't make great decisions when you were 20 or 15 or 12, but that doesn't matter. It is never too early. It's never too late to start building your pathway for success. And James, I just want to thank you for helping me communicate that message. It's self-evident. As you can see, he's sitting here in my makeshift office. I didn't start in the garage. I started in my living room, but I'm just grateful to you for coming down. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Pleasure.
Thanks for being a part of the Prison Professors program. And we'll be back with the lesson. Make sure that you go through the lesson. Make sure that you focus on the vocabulary building skills, focus on the critical thinking skills, and develop your writing skills, and you will create opportunities out of nothing.